For an app to exist at all, a user has to use it and they go through a series of steps. It's like when you think about using Facebook, you just think, I log onto Facebook and talk to people. What you're actually doing is opening up your laptop, going to facebook.com, clicking on someone's face, typing in a message box, hitting enter, waiting for it to send, waiting for them to reply. It's a series of cause and effect that actually happens. And so you have to go through that cause and effect of actually happens to see what your app could actually do. What we're about to do is take our really fluffy goals and turn them into something that a programmer can understand. And a programmer wants a very specific list of things that happen and a very specific list of the components of all of those things that happen. So just by laying out what a user will comfortably experience, we'll learn what all of those components are.
We're going to create a journey map for this first-time plant buyer user. And for each step, we're going to show what the user sees and what the user does. Split the board into two parts. One's for our user flows, and the other is going to be for documenting objects, users, and interfaces. Now we're going to grab a user story, one of those goals, and we're going to go through the experience that a user has while trying to achieve that goal in our app. We'll start our UX flow with Pinterest. So write down the step in the flow, then write down two things: what the user sees and what the user does. Try to keep it to just one see and do combo. For example, they might see a plant that says buy plants directly from gardeners near you, and then the call to action, the do, is learn how it works. Simple. Now that learn action leads to another see-do combo. Let's say it's a how it works page with a see and a do for it. In this case, that could be an infographic showing how the app works and then a sign up for free button. Sign up would lead to a make an account page where the user signs up. Now we get to be a bit specific. Let's write down what information we collect about the user at this point. As we discover stuff about what our app does through the user flow, we're going to note that information down in the form of objects, users, and interfaces. If you've got a great big whiteboard, just put it on the side, or if you don't, write it down in a document. It's basically like coder speak for things in an app, and we want to be specific. So an object is a thing that you manipulate in an app. In our case, a plant is an object. We can find plants on a map, we can buy a plant, we can add and remove plants, objects. Interfaces are kind of like the screens that you use to interact with objects. So a map is an interface wherein we find the plant objects. A buy plant interface is where you buy the plant. Users are what you think they are, people using the app. So you can think about it as users use interfaces to interact with objects. So we'd write down the user type and what data that user has. For example, we might grab their email, a password, maybe their location, and even a photo. So this is cool, right? We've just discovered some attributes to a user. So let's be specific and write them down. We've got a first name and a last name, an email address, a password, and a photo. Those all go as attributes under our plant buyer user. All right, back to the user flow. We've got a choice now. The next step for our gardener after they've made an account might be to search for plants near me, or maybe it's to find plants of a certain type. Let's pick one and see what happens. Now we don't need to be exhaustive with all of the options. We just want a single user flow that finishes. So we'll start with find plants near me. Okay, for the plants near me interface, let's just draw it out so we can get our head around how it might work. We might have a map with me in the middle and then little dots for all of the nearby plants I could buy. That tells us that there's a new kind of object called a plant, and each plant definitely has a location, otherwise we wouldn't be able to plot them on the map. From here, the user might modify the map by, say, price range. Maybe they'll see upper and lower price boundaries, and then the do would be to change the price. Notice how we're chunking out each individual step. So in our idea of a map, there might be lots of modifications you can do, but we're going through what each step does and what the user sees at each point.
Now, it can be easy to get confused with a system like a map that's got lots of options, and that's why we go through each modification that's made step by step, with the thing that the user sees and the thing that the user does.
As you sketch out the journey map, remember that you're here to fulfill the goals of your user. So keep looking back at it and go, can we charge our user towards that goal?
So if our user modified by price range, this takes us back to the map, showing us plants that suit that price range. Notice that this means each of our plants objects now has a price. Add this to our plants object. This can be a lot to get your head around, but let's just try and get to the end of a user flow. So let's say that the user clicks on a plant. What will they get? Probably a picture of the plant, what kind of plant it is, and a price, plus who's selling it and when I can come to pick it up. This means our plant object now has a picture, a kind of plant, when it is for sale, and who's selling it. Now this is where things get tricky. This means that each user will also have a plants for sale object within it. And it's good to note when you're referencing another object. For example, users have one or many plants. The user's going to hit buy the plant. They'll then see a credit card form, and the do action is to specify their card details in the form. Then we get to see, say, the address of the user we're buying from and a phone number, so we can arrange pickup of the plant. Now in our UX flow, the user will physically go and pick up the plant. We can just assume this happens outside of the app, but it's really good to write it in the UX flow. This now means that our user object has phone numbers and home addresses in the system, which does mean some security concerns, but it's what we've specified. And finally, we are done. The buyer has their plant, the seller has successfully sold a plant, and hopefully everyone's happy.
Remember, the whole point of this is to solve a user's pain. So your journey map is done once you've finally gotten to the point of finishing the user's goal.
Seeing it on a whiteboard, seeing what the user goes through, means that we've checked all of the gaps in our understanding. So we've gone from, I have a magical idea for an app and it just works, to here are the steps that make it work.